Good morning. Welcome. My name is Hedvig Morvai, and I would like to welcome you warmly at this very cold, rainy morning in Vienna on behalf of the Erste Foundation. I'm very happy and excited to participate at another discussion in the series of European contexts, which is a joint initiative, a cooperation initiative with Presse Club Concordia, which is now lasting since a number of years. And it is a series of discussion which is trying to support the public debate and independent journalism by inviting experts, journalists, and the public to illuminate on the most pressing issues, political, societal issues that are shaping our democracies. And these are objectives which lie at the heart of the work of the Erste Foundation. And that is why we are trying to bring, actually to create spaces, to create rooms where we can bring those people who are actually providing evidence-based expert insights and analysis to the current issues and developments. And actually what I appreciate a lot, and I think this is something what Mirjana should acknowledge, and this is why she has his fan base, which is not joining only here on the spot, but also online following the discussion, because it is a very well curated series of discussions. And I'm very much appreciating this value. So enjoy and participate actively, because this is always something what we encourage very much. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Hedvig. Good morning. Good morning, everyone in the room. Good morning, everyone online here in Presse Club Concordia in rainy Vienna. And I thank you for joining the European Context Panels, Elections in Hungary, Impact at Home and Abroad. There is, every evening, I think, there is something about Hungary in Vienna, probably even in other European capitals and not capitals, so I think that the expectations are very high. We have, and I shall introduce them right away, 3 extraordinary speakers. 2 arrived yesterday from Budapest and 1 from Brussels. So we start with Zsuzsanna Szelényi, political analyst, former politician who started her career in Fidesz, so she is an insider, outsider, because she left the party when it left liberalism. She was a parliamentarian. She is a program director at the Central European University Democracy Institute, and author of a book that I have here, although she did not ask me to promote it, but I think it's really excellent. It is called Tainted Democracy, Viktor Orbán and the Subversion of Hungary. She's also a non-resident senior fellow with Center for European Policy Analysis, and she is a former fellow and alumna of the Institute of Human Sciences, IVM in Vienna. The second speaker is Péter Magyar. It's not Péter Magyar, he's not a politician. The difference is 1 letter at the very end of his last name, so no confusion. He's an award-winning journalist. In 2010, he received the Investigative Journalist of the Year award for a series of articles on exposing the political dimensions of the Russian-Ukrainian-Hungarian gas trade. In 2020, the National Hungarian Press Association awarded him the Hungarian Press Prize in recognition of his lifetime achievement. Peter, you're young. Why did they start giving you lifetime achievement so early?
You can do it in Hungary.
They probably thought you would stop working then.
It was more than 20 years of career. I'm almost 50.
Oh, that's very old. And last but not least, Boton Feledi. He lives in Brussels, and he shuttles between Brussels and Budapest, lawyer, foreign policy expert, political analyst, and director of Red Snow Consulting and European Leadership Program based in Brussels. I also understand you're a regular speaker at the outlet Partizan. I'm not sure if you're a bit of an activist as well. I'm not really sure, but that you will explain yourself. All 3 speakers are regularly invited by Hungarian and international media to comment on political developments in Hungary. My name is Mirjana Tomic. I curate and moderate European context panels, and I work for two Vienna-based organizations, Presse Club Concordia, where we are right now, founded in 1859 and still very active in protecting and fighting for press freedom, and Forum Jornalismus und Medien, a training institution, professional journalists. Last but not least, my thanks to Erste Foundation, who supports the seminars. The format today is very simple. I will be talking to our speakers for about an hour, and then you will have 1 hour to ask questions, both online, via chat, and here in the room. I will start from the end. One would expect us to start like, what do you expect now will happen about the campaign? I will ask that, but I want to start from the end. And I would like to ask each speaker at the beginning, why are these elections so important, and why so many politicians visit Budapest, and why so many those in opposition and those in the government praise Viktor Orbán as a model? How come that Viktor Orbán, a politician from a small European country of approximately 9.5 million inhabitants, became a symbol of the far right or radical right movements in Western Europe, from Budapest to Buenos Aires, passing via Washington? What I understand is J.D. Vance plans to visit Budapest next week in support of Viktor Orbán's campaign. Just an example, last weekend, an array of top far-right politicians, some in power, some in opposition, but could be in power next year, from Paris, Lisbon, Madrid, Berlin, Rome, The Hague, Warsaw, and Vienna, and other cities, attended a high-level far-right or the radical right meetings in Budapest, Patriots for Europe and Conservative Political Action Conference. President Donald Trump addressed the audience via video link. In order not to make this introduction too long, it was like a competition who praised Viktor Orbán more. He was like the symbol, he was courageous, and the list of compliments was rather long, depending that all these European and not only European leaders said. So French politician Marine Le Pen said, she praised his intelligence, courage, and vision. Hungary has become a symbol in Europe of a proud and sovereign people's resistance against oppression. My first question is, and it will go to Zsuzsa, because Zsuzsa said about 7 years ago in Vienna that Viktor Orbán, first she knows him personally, but second, she said about 7 years ago, he's no longer interested in Hungary, he's interested in making history in Europe. Is he managing? Why is he a symbol? Austria's Herbert Kickl is not a symbol, and neither are other far-right politicians. Why Viktor Orbán? What has he done so successfully? Zsuzsa, please.
Thank you very much. Well, this is one of the big questions, of course, but as you may know, that on the 12th of April, so in less than 20 days, there will be elections in Hungary, and Orbán party, Fidesz, won already four elections when he received supermajority, constitutional majority. This is a situation which no any other country in Europe ever witnessed since the Second World War. And I think it's important to know that this is an extraordinary power, and we just cannot underline how big power it is. So Orbán gained this power in 2010 at democratic elections, though it was not a very, very good election system we had. But basically, it gave him the opportunity that with the support of 52% of the popular vote, he received 67% of the mandates in parliament. I find it important to say that he actually never really had more than half of the support of the voters, and still he always could repeat the 67th constitutional majority. And this discrepancy, has been growing over the years. So this superpower in Hungary, in a small, relatively centralized, homogeneous country, provided him an opportunity to to experiment in Hungary. And after the 2008 crisis, there was a lot of confusion in the West, understanding what this was. And this created a room for Orban to go beyond the usual norms and see whether the European elites, how far he can go. He started to maneuver, and he realized that he can do that without much response. So this is a start of his march towards international recognition and fame. If I want to be short, which is not so easy, which is such an interesting question, I would say that the stake of this election and the reason why Orban was successful, he introduced, through this maneuvering, through this experimenting on the top of this big power he had in Hungary, a political style which was and oftentimes still new in Europe, but he has been doing now for 16 years, very aggressive, very assertive, transactionalist politics, short-termist, gain the most out of the moment, and he was always successful. He just did not recognize, or actually he recognized that the rest of Europe is actually, the European political culture is a relatively decent style. There are certain rules, even rules which are not written, but still there, ethos, and he just did not keep them. So he was he introduced this very aggressive mood, and which we know from other countries, but it's a very autocratic style, and he managed more and more and more. And the European elites for a long time did not recognize that this is a danger. But what Orban did is more, and when Marine Le Pen says he's a visionary, we should be careful with what kind of vision this is, of course, but he created from this style, this leadership style, a whole system, which he called illiberal system. And when he said it, it was 12 years ago, he meant it. Illiberalism means not liberal, right? So he basically went against, clearly and openly against everything. What are the bases of a liberal democratic system? And what are these bases? So it's basically the neutrality of the state, its rule of law, separation of power, open society, a pluralist society with many ideas. These are all the basics which Orban went against. So he started to centralize the state, occupy the state, capture state institution, and created a party state, or a state party. Basically, Fidesz party is equal to the Hungarian state, and state is used, state's resources, human capital, institution, money is used for partisan purposes. And then just to conclude this, the separation of power, obviously, if he does not respect it, it means that they don't take it seriously. So obviously, all the institutions of checks and balances are now filled by loyalists who are serving the party's interests. And on the finally, the open society, the pluralistic state. I mean, illiberal is anti-liberal. So basically, Orban's party is using state resources to promote a certain set of values, which they call conservatives, though it's not really conservatives. Conservatives can tell why. But basically use institutions, cultural institutions, educational systems, and everything to support one party's interest and certain values. And this is what is so spectacularly successful in Hungary after 16 years, again, with supermajority in power. And of course, this many to-be autocrats like this. This is a model, this is a playbook. It can be adapted to basically any other political environment.
We shall discuss a bit later why is he attractive to his voters. But now I want to go to you, Botton. You live in Brussels. Was it that easy to convince all these politicians in Brussels that about the Hungarian model? Why do you think he has had so much success? has he had success in Brussels? I would like to know what politicians say in private rather than what they say publicly.
Of course, and we are online. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad to share everything I can. We should not deny the successes of Viktor Orbán in creating the Patriots for Europe group, which became the third largest group in the European Parliament, and that is a fact. And it is rather growing than decreasing at this point, as they succeeded to get Vox, the Spanish radical party, from the European conservatives to the Patriots group. Apparently, it was in time at the same interval when Vox received, interestingly, some credits from a Hungarian bank for their campaign. But this is certainly a success that Viktor Orbán's Fidesz is the only party that was formerly member of EPP, and we should not underestimate the extreme institutional know-how that they bring to the Patriots for Europe. This is something
Can you
that...
be more specific?
How you run a political group in the European Parliament is an extremely valuable know-how, because you receive subsidies as a group, you receive speaking times differently when you are a big group. There are lots of privileges and lots of rights that you can exercise as a group. And how you use that, especially with the French party being the largest Rassemblement National in the group, where the culture that in the DACH countries, I don't need to explain that you have political foundations, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and the rest, that does not exist in France. So their understanding of how this should function was extremely limited, and Le Pen was never in power. So he is playing with guys in the group that practically have never been in power, except now Babiš. But that's something why a smaller European member states government party can play an oversized role in a group where the other parties actually lack experience on government and European level. So that allows him to get friends who wants to join the game. That's a pure political, rational, logical game.
Thank you. Péter, what is your view, A, on why, how come that Viktor Orbán is so successful, and B, Péter Magyari, Magyar, not Magyari, the politician, do you think he would have the same role if he wins the elections? International role, we will go to the internal one.
Sure. So Orban's success, I think his international moves based on Hungarian aims inside. So when he was still a liberal prime minister in the end of 90s, he wanted to show that he is not just a politician, but he is someone, and his movement is something that could finish the fate of Hungarians. And to understand it, it's very important to know what is that kind of mindset. In elementary school, all Hungarians learning from 19th century poets about Hungary should be bigger, stronger, more influential. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of good things because of foreign attacks, Turkish, Habsburg, so on. But we will have to be grand again, or we will die.
Excuse me, when did this type of curriculum start?
From very early age.
No, I mean, was it after the fall of communism, or?
No, it was always with us since the 20th century.
Okay.
It was a part of the story. The communication around it was different in the communist era. Oh, it's really about the power of the proletariats. They were thinking about that, just they didn't know the word. But the story is the same. We deserve more. And Orban is always acted someone who is able to be more. And it's very important to show for himself that he became a player in an international league. He's close to the American president, the Russian president, even the Chinese president. He's more powerful than any other prime ministers in the region, and almost as powerful as the big European head of states. And to achieve this, he could find a great narrative with this illiberal story. In 2010, he won on a ticket with not an illiberal promise. If you see the Fidesz program in 2009-10, it was a full liberal, back to the democracy and so on. And when Russia became stronger with the conflicts against Ukraine in 2013 and 14, then he felt there's an opportunity, because the West was really soft against the Crimea situation, the Donbass situation. And he felt there's a rising of this new radical right, which is called hard right in these years. And he found out there's a story, there's a market where he could be the first, because he was already in power with the democratic ticket, and he changed his narrative. And he could show how do you rule on this kind of narrative. So I think that is the story of his success. But his first aim was not to influence the world. His first aim was to show the Hungarians, I am the one who finished that kind of fate to go back to the world leader phase for a small country.
Thank you. You wanted to add? And then
Just one
please.
thought, yes. Because if we understand this populist thing as a political scientist, as anti-pluralist, we can talk about that later, but it's also importantly anti-establishment. And imagine a politician who has been in power for 16 years being anti-establishment. That's the world champion of anti-establishment rhetorics. And that is putting him in this uncomfortable post that anything that is establishment must be outside of Hungary. So there is this track that he cannot really leave behind, because anything he attacks cannot be his own establishment. Therefore, it already started with George Soros, but then the United Nations in 2012, and then you can go on and on with all the presidents of the Commission, of the European Commission, and it is even more amplified today. So this is then easier to connect with other politicians from other countries who happen to be attacking the same international actors for good reason or not.
Well, I was going to come to you now.
Yeah, but I also would like to make a comment, because I think what Péter said is very important, and we translate it as this victimhood-based of politics as a Hungarian specialty, but it is not. What is fantastic, and we could see over the last decades, that this story actually fits in any country of the world. Most of the smaller countries were at some time of their history some kind of occupation or foreign influence. But even in big countries, which were colonialist countries before, they can also, because they lost their colonies, so the victimhood idea is such a human thing that it can be used as a political tool basically anywhere in the world, even in the United States, even probably also in China, right? Chinese also have their own victimhood because of their histories were certain times when the Japanese attacked them. So you can always pull it out and you can always build it. And this is also kind of big secret behind of the influence, because Orban speaks about this, represents, and everyone can attach to this. So it resonated very widely.
So he is the symbol of those who feel victims.
Yeah, he's the resistant, who is the revolutionary, who is against the whatever kind of big power. It can be any kind of big power. So it's very good for conspiracy theories narratives.
I would like to, I was about to ask you, Zsuzsa, you started in Fidesz, then you left Fidesz, then you joined an opposition party, and now you're an independent analyst. You're insider, outsider, all at the same time. You know some people. My question is, and you described it in your book, how come it was so easy to change positions from being anti-Soviet to being pro-Russian, to being non-religious to becoming religious? Then you also mentioned in 2014 it was about illiberal democracy. In 2018 about Christian democracy. My question is, could you just give a very short overview? How come it was so easy to change positions, number one, and number two, what made Orban so attractive for the voters? Because I don't think that voters chose Orban because of the greatness of Hungary. Did he deliver anything? What did he deliver? Over 16 years.
Yeah, well, but the whole thing started much earlier. So Fidesz is the most successful party in the entire Central and Eastern Europe. It's the longest existing party and the most successful one, being on power now for, I don't know, more on power than not. The party story itself is really interesting. Orban basically took over Fidesz in 1993. This was a time when he was elected as the chairman. Before that time, it was a collective leadership. And ever since he shaped Fidesz for very opportunistic ways in order to gain more support.
Did he believe in anything, or it is only about
Obviously, everyone believes in something. So I don't think it's a kind of question we should really answer. But what he believed in, that he wanted to be a prime minister and a thought leader and an influencer. Obviously, in the 1990s, he did not think he would be where he is now. But he always wanted more. And he made Fidesz a party which was very flexible and able to change whenever it was necessary to gain more power. And basically, Fidesz was a relatively small party during the 1990s, but it turned from liberal to conservative. Because there was a vacuum in Hungarian politics. We don't have to go into details, but basically Orban so he gained the popular vote in the 1990s on the basis of this taking nationalism as a core issue for Fidesz party. But on top of what Péter explained, the traditional victimhood kind of nationalism, which is very typical in Eastern Europe, he modernized this with a proud. So we are a proud nation, not just a victim, but we are someone. We have a destiny for it. And this was spectacular. So basically, this was a ticket, as Péter used the word, that Orban basically took over from the other smaller conservative right-wing parties. He could manage this, and he collected a lot of supporters. So his support originates from the 1990s, and especially when he was prime minister first, and he could consolidate all the rider parties. And actually, he pulled under one umbrella, under Fidesz, liberal, conservatives, intellectuals, and even the far-right voters. So this big unity party he created by 2002. And when they lost elections in 2002, Orban was very successful to basically pull together a lot of smaller groups on the basis of their frustration. So what I want to say, it's quite a spectacular story, how Orban could use also the failures of his party for build up on frustration and make more unity. So by the time he got prime minister with the supermajority in 2010, this was a big party with a lot of supporters. It was a camp, a base, which other parties did not really have. And this model is also something which Orban is selling now at the international level. Of course, on power since 2002, he could also show himself as a supporter, specifically making a cap on energy prices, which was the major campaign and slogan in 2014. See, he also demonstrated he's not only protecting Hungarians from whatever enemy, he's also providing well-being. It was possible because from 2012 to
Did he provide well-being?
Yeah, And there were like 7 years when Hungary and the European, especially Eastern Europe, was pretty good. Hungary had a kind of 4% of growth in these years until 2019. So this was nicely redistributed. Everyone could feel it was EU membership benefit, obviously. So this was very strongly related to that we are part of the European Union, not just the financial transfers, just basically the member investments and everything. So yes, he could also provide this. So many people voted for Fidesz for years because of pragmatic reasons. But of course, it's changed over the time. And one reason why, because the economy didn't go so well after a while, because it was a cyclic economic policy, it was really not pulling any reserves. So when situation became more problematic in the world, Hungary had no reserves. And also because the Russia politics, it was very tricky for many, many people. It was just not so easy to explain, even though Orban was always not kind of friendly to Russia, but very pragmatic argument. Because Hungarians are actually not, it's not Slavic country, there's no Slavic brotherhood with Russia, that was never. So he had to be careful, but this pragmatic approach that we are only dealing with Russia as business matters, this was something that was essential to change many Hungarians' mindset, but was tricky and of course.
Thank you. I want to go to Peter now. You're following the campaign of Péter Magyar. Does he represent any radical change, or he's a nice early version of Orban? I understand that his discourse is also very patriotic. He sings songs, he recites poetry. I understand he doesn't talk about press freedom or rule of law. He uses different arguments. So when you visit his rallies, what do people expect from him? Is it radical change, or we have to get rid of Orban at any price and then let's see what happens? Because what I also understand is that his support base is very heterogeneous.
Yes, it's absolutely true. I wrote an article in the autumn some months ago about some kind of similarity with the Polish situation in the early 90s, when they had the Solidarity movement, which was a huge umbrella with very different fractions, but they ran together against the communist regime and they made a landslide one. And after that, it's separated to so many fractions. And still right now, we see the heirs of these platforms fighting against each other to rule Poland. And his movement a little bit like this, because there are the liberal elites from Budapest, people coming from the extreme right also joining, everyone who is fed up with Orban's power. And so it's a huge umbrella. If we see his political program, which we never know, before an election, everyone has very nice words. His program is a moderate leftist liberal, I would say, which is written. Also, he uses symbols on his rallies, as you said, what Fidesz did before. So it's a very nationalistic model. So it's a huge mix of everything, which is important, I think, two things. First of all, his audience is mostly not the lowest class.
Is or is not?
Not.
Not.
And it's important because Fidesz's main target is the lowest class right now, the least educated people, I would say, who has the most problematic economic situation. I mean, the very poor. So, and Magyar speaks for everyone above this level, I think. And the other very important thing, and I think that is the most important, Mr. Magyar's program is the revolution of normality. And it sounds very strange. Orban made his illiberal exposure when the normality was the mainstream in Western Europe. Right now, as the hard right and hard left even growing in France, in Germany, in Austria, and everywhere in the Western Hemisphere, the new revolution is coming from the middle, for the old mainstream, for the normal. The main promise of Mr. Magyar's that the central power should be limited because it's too much now. It's too much for even the local authorities, for everything decided on political level. And he promised, I will stop it. We will see whether he will be able to do that, but I think that is the most important promise of him.
Before we talk about where are we now in the campaign, I understand that fighting against corruption is one of the topics of Magyar. And Zsuzsa may explain a bit of what Orban family and proxies and friends from his village own, because they own quite a bit, and to what extent this network, economic network, can be also a problem for the change of the government. But I would like to quote Daniel Pál Rényi, a journalist, a Hungarian journalist who was our guest in 2016. Now, when were the two? 18. And he said one sentence that I have repeated many times. Someone in the audience asked him, how come that you expect Orban to win again when he's so corrupt? And Daniel said this really interesting sentence. He said, well, people in villages do not even conceive how much money he's stealing. These are such huge sums. They can understand if someone steals 1,000 euros or 2,000, but here we are speaking of huge amounts. And then they think, well, if he's corrupt, it's better that one of ours is corrupt than the opposition. Could you comment on that? Is there a change in opinion about corruption at this moment? Let's start with you, Péter, and then you, Zsuzsa.
Absolutely changing. Because it's absolutely true what Daniel has said here. And it's also about, okay, that's the way life goes. Everyone is stealing because that kind of society we have. That is the main rule. And it's okay that the leader is able to steal the most. But let me steal my own part, as I'm a smaller participation, but I can make my own thing also. And that is a social contract, what has worked. But what happened? The economy had problems. In the 2010s, as Zsuzsa also spoke about it, it was a very good time, even for people who are from the lower classes. They could step up. Huge. It will never happen how many new cars were sold than in 2010s, for example, how many new flats were built, and so on. And people mainly on the countryside felt that's the best ages we lived ever. And it was related, on so many cases, to EU funds. And there was the COVID, then the sanctions from the EU, the energy price problems, and all this kind of growing disappeared. And people right now feeling that contract, we still together, the big guy still most, but I'm able to get something, is over. And people say they are still living in beautiful way, having these luxury things, and every pictures in the media, it's about how they live, and we became poorer. And that's why it became an important factor that Mr. Magyar is able to speak about corruption, and there are new ears for that sentences.
Would you like to add, Zsuzsa?
Well, it's all true. I mean, it was really fascinating how when I was in politics like 10 years ago, we couldn't do anything with corruption because of people just understood. There was also kind of partisan understanding of corruption. So I think it's also true in other countries. You know, if it's our people who steal, well, we are just more easygoing than when the other parties, right? So it's always the opposition who are more sensitive to state-related corruptions than supporters of the incumbent regime. But also, if you see around the world, you know, autocrats always fail on corruption cases because there is at moments sometimes when it doesn't work any longer. And Peter explained it very well, and I just want to add that also one extra element that Viktor Orbán's own family become very much on the flashlight. So there were other oligarchs in previous years close to Orban, but actually when his son-in-law took over kind of one of the richest person and buying and doubling his wealth double each year, and when they introduced family members into structure and significant industries, and then I think it became too much, especially when the food prices went up 80% in 2013. So suddenly there was this time when, so this also actually helped the vacuum for Magyar to come in. It was not without reason that he appeared in 2024 and not 5 years before, because by that time, the post-2022 election, all these things suddenly came all together and created the room for him to step up.
I just want to quote from Financial Times. The analysis shows that 14% of all the funds awarded in state tenders under Orban went to 42 companies owned by 13 associates. The most powerful ones are from his village or school friends. Even his father became rich and lives in a castle. In spite of corruption, Orban has been winning. Well, this was me. This was not the Financial Times. You have been taking notes. What would you like to add? And then we come to campaign and where we are now. What is that you wanted to add? How is this, what Péter and Zsuzsa have been commenting, how is it interpreted in Brussels? The funds are withheld. Will this have impact in Hungary? And how far do you think is Orban willing to go to counter Brussels?
So to nail the rule of law procedure from the Brussels perspective and the so-called beautiful expression horizontal enabling conditions that are attached by the Commission to disbursing money, overwhelming majority of the conditions are anti-corruption measures. While the government says that it is about migration and that Ursula von der Leyen wants to send migrants to Hungary. Okay, so that's a complete parallel universe if you read the Hungarian Fidesz papers and when you look at the official documents, when the council decided not to pay out this 55% of three types of payments from the MFF. So that's about corruption. And when, again, you attach what Zsuzsa mentioned, the timeline of the 16 years, over 16 years, you grow comfortable even on local level with corruption. And I guess this is something we underestimate, how important that is when corruption is not spilling over, it's spilling under. It's spilling under to mayors, to local landlords, warlords, you name it, green barons in the East European vocabulary. So you have these local strongmen who start to feel secure in their corruption and in their schemes of cheating on EU money. And that allows them to go further and further. And that's the point when we arrive to extremely absurd scenes when there is a forest walk without a forest. But money has been taken for it. Or when that is what is showcasing to you how the immune system is not working on the one hand and how people can grow really adapt to this corruption scheme that was allowed by the big government members' corruption themselves. So that's something we should not underestimate. Sorry if there was a second part of your
No,
question.
I asked you, how far do you think Orban will go in countering Brussels?
I mean, Orban has gone as
Far as
he could.
possible. He
And you-
cannot
you-
go any further.
You have seen that there are several elements of blackmailing already in the fire, not only the 90 billion euro Ukrainian support, but also the 20th sanction package. Then there is the MFF coming, the multi-annual financial framework, whether there are new incomes voted, that also is needing consensus on behalf of the Union as such, and then the disbursement from the European Peace Facility, and we could go on. So these are all vetoes that Orban has been exercising, and when we are in Brussels, I often hear the expression, the EU 26, well, that was before Fico, so EU 25 maybe by now, and maybe 24 the last week, because Babiš also joined them in some of the initiatives. So I guess that is the risk and the challenge of the mainstream or so-called platform parties in-house.
Just a follow-up question. Why do you think that Hungarian foreign minister has been so active in informing his Moscow counterpart or Russian counterpart in what was happening? What did they try to get out of it? That's one thing. What did Hungary hope to get out of Russia or of Putin? And second, to what extent, and then I'll ask Olga, is US and Russian interference in the Hungarian elections, to what, is it being successful or other elements are more important? So let's start with you and then, yeah.
The Russian question is extremely complex. I'm not sure if we really have the time to go into it. But of course, it's vanity money, and you can name the few incentives that usually goes with spying cases.
So it's follow the money?
That's one very easy thing with all the Russian presence, with the former International Investment Bank, with the enlargement of the nuclear power plant, and with the shady gas contracts that Peter was writing about. So there is a lot of money moving in and through Hungary by Russian entities, for sure, and proved
It never stopped.
by investigative. They have never stopped. But then, and I guess that's the more important part for us in such a room, we have to admit that not only Orban, but many Western European politicians have been extremely naive and idealists by approaching Putin in the early 2000s and early 2010s. They just have been duped. And Orban, I am afraid, is no exception in the way that he believes he can play with Putin, not being friends, that was never the question, and I agree with you, but playing with the big guys. But that's not the case. Putin has a very different tradition, and let's not get into the imperialist Soviet continuity, but he overestimated his marge de maneuver with Putin, and now he's locked in this game. And that's why we come to scenes where 16 times have the foreign minister flew to Moscow since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And including Lukashenko and the rest. So it's just, again, absurd for any eastern flank NATO member state to expose their security in such ways. And on the US interference, one thing, and that's my hypothesis since Trump came in, it has an extremely important chilling effect. A chilling effect in the way that maybe there would be other countries in the region who would sympathize with Tisza, but they are being discouraged by Trump and their policies, either if they are on government or in opposition, in formal and many times probably informal ways. That doesn't help, and we should not underestimate the free speech element of the big platforms that allows a free rampage on campaign issues. Despite the ban of political campaigning on Meta, what we see is that Fidesz MPs are happily paying for their advertisement. Still in January, there were discoveries about that. But anyway, they are smart enough to circumvent the ban, and Gongo's government NGOs are paying well for advertisement in measures that are actually higher than in most of the member states proportionately.
What you took notes, Peter. Would you like to comment on, you are on the ground covering the elections. So can you tell us, do you feel that Russian and US intervention has any impact or people are voting thinking of totally different issues. From what I understand, I may be wrong, that 80% of the electorate is already decided. It's now the fight for the 20%.
Yes, and I think it's never 100% of the turnout. 80% decided, it means almost everyone who wants to vote has already decided. The question is the mobilization. People who are leaning to Fidesz are less enthusiastic to vote right now. And this is a very important factor. How could Orban make his people move? And in that relation, the foreign influence could be interesting, but it's not the most important factor at all.
What is the most important factor?
I will answer very soon, just I finish up, because the American president and the Russian president, both of them said several times that they think Orban should win. And it would be important for the Hungarians and for the world. And it is important in Hungary because Orban can show, I'm a special leader, I'm the only Hungarian who is interesting for everyone, who are the most important people in the world. And if you lost me, then Hungary lose the chance to be important, because Péter Magyar will never be as important for the big guys as I was. So on related that story, and he's building this story because he's speaking always about foreign relations, about world theories, about international energy trade and so on. So he would like to make this issue very important. But what is really important in Hungary is how do people live? I think the economic situation. Do people believe that Péter Magyar is able to govern and not just speak? And there's a very new element of the Hungarian campaign. I think we shouldn't tell the war story because it's very difficult, but it turned out that the Hungarian state-owned secret agency was working against Magyar Péter's party. And a policeman just yesterday made a very long interview and told how this happened. And maybe it could be a game changer also. I think that is the most important part of the campaign right now.
Thank you. Would you like to continue,
Yeah, maybe that's the moment when it makes sense to speak a little bit about the electoral system. And because before we go into the campaign, so the fact is that Péter Magyar's party called Tisza is, since the last spring, so almost for a year, is like minimum 10% is more popular than Fidesz party. It's since January, it's a growing difference. So Magyar's party in a normal situation actually should win because this is a trend and the trend is working for Tisza. But it's not at all necessarily happening. And this is why we are here, right? Otherwise it would not be so big issue. But the thing is that we are, after 16 years of supermajority with Viktor Orbán, which party in each and every elections changed the electoral rules. So basically 1 year before each elections in Hungary, the electoral rules are changed in many different ways. Oftentimes it's almost invisible. It's the advertisement law, it's the party finance law, it's a little bit of some kind of related laws, but oftentimes the electoral law itself. And for example, last year it was again changed because Tisza was already there, so Fidesz saw the threat. So there were two kinds of changes. Just to give you concrete examples, there were gerrymandering, so the lines, the borders of the certain district were changed and smartly figured out how they might influence the voter and organize distribute them appropriately. And there was something else which we did not have before. It's called misappropriation, that basically the certain electoral districts, Hungary has 106 electoral districts, it's a winner-takes-all system. Basically, the size of these typically should be approximately the same amount of voter in each district, but now in Hungary there are districts when many, many more people are voting in one district. For example, Budapest was 18 districts before. It's an opposition city. Opposition will win all the 18 districts, so it's now only 16. What did I say? So out of 18, now it's only 16 districts. So places, neighborhoods, cities where our opposition victory is more given, there are less mandates are born. Whereas in other parts of Hungary where more Fidesz strongholds, they were multiplied, the districts. So actually like 60,000 people will vote for one people, whereas in Budapest it's 100,000 for one. So this is the misappropriation, and this is something working for Fidesz, and this is why even 45% of popular votes can result a situation that Fidesz wins. So they can win with less than half, significantly less than half of the votes. And Magyar's party or any other opposition party should probably win 55% in order to receive a simple majority. So it's a hugely disproportional system. It's really not just unfair, it's unjust. And again, it was like this years ago, but in this new political context, it's much more visible now. But so this is, I just wanted to say that this is a context, and we cannot be sure that the opposition wins at the elections because there are so many influences, foreign influences, Hungarian influences. The electoral law itself is unjust, and of course Fidesz has an incredible state budget. The money is flown into this campaign. Anyone who comes to Hungary can see it on the street. So it's just uncomparable, but not like a little bit bigger money for Fidesz, but 1,000 times more bigger. So these are the differences because the state is serving Fidesz party.
Thank you. You wanted to?
Yes, I just want to again highlight what Péter said, because I guess you might have not read that in English, or maybe it's not yet even out. But that is actually a game changer, potentially, in the Hungarian election, what came out yesterday. It's a whistleblower, a policeman who was working with the anti-pedophile unit in Budapest. And he was going on record for 1.5 hours, explaining how the state security services were interfering with them in order to seize the computers of 2 Tisza information security employees. So again, the Hungarian Secret Service pushed a police element to seize computers and start allegations of child pornography against people who later were discovered having nothing to do with child pornography. This is really showing you that the criminal element potentially entered into the campaigning. We have seen that last week when talking about the Ukrainian money transfer going through Hungary from Wien to Kiev.
Could you explain the details? Because it's a very interesting story about this.
In a nutshell, there is a regular transport between Vienna, one of the banks, and going to the National Bank of Ukraine. Cash gold is going to the supplies of the Ukrainian National Bank. And this has been ongoing for years through Hungary in vehicles because the flights were not able to get to Kiev. And suddenly, 2 weeks ago, the Hungarian anti-terror unit, that is said to be the closest to Orban, stopped these 2 vehicles and seized the money. 24 hours later, legislation was introduced to legally be able to seize the money, later, not before. And the 7 people with the vehicles were said to be involved in money laundering, but no charges were raised until today. And they were actually kicked out of the country the next day. The criminal element, Guardian reported from Kiev, that they were injected relaxant drugs before their hearings. This is old KGB method, right? So you don't usually inject people being interrogated. And they have been handcuffed, according to their own testimonials, for almost the entire period with a bag on their head. That's not a European way of treating anyone.
But I
especially in
understood
this
also that previously it was a company close to Orban that was ensuring this transport, and this time it was another company. Am I right?
Yes, indeed. It was one of the government close businessmen who was bringing the money. So they were aware.
So
of
now
this
it was the
happening.
competition who did it, so better.
It's not about the competition, it's about Zelensky and Orban and provocating the Ukrainian side so much so that they would say something that finally happened, so that the Fidesz campaign can use the sayings of Zelensky, which they did.
Well, we are 1 hour, so before we open the floor to questions, I just have, well, I would say the last question, but not quite. Where are we now in the campaign? What can happen between now and the 12th of April? And what happens if Fidesz wins? And what happens if Tisza wins? What can we expect? Zsuzsa, could you please start?
I'm happy to go into this, but just would like to finish the transport story, because it is the international element which was explained, but of course it serves Hungarian campaign, because the main campaign narrative in this campaign is very typical conspiracy theory based campaign, which is the case in Hungary for last 16 years. And basically the money which was taken already a couple of hours later when this whole happened, this very unjustified story, Fidesz politicians started to speak about a gold convoy taking money to Tisza party. So the idea is that this Ukrainian car full of money is actually not a part of a regular service, which is happening since the beginning of the war, but it is there to serve the opposition. And the conspiracy theory idea of this campaign by Fidesz is that Tisza party obviously is and Péter Magyar himself obviously is an agent for foreign forces. Ukrainians, the Brussels bureaucrats, von der Leyen, Zelensky, and Péter Magyar are on the pictures together. Now it's already Zelensky and Magyar saying that they are dangerous for Hungary, whereas of course Orban appears then the savior of Hungarians. So this is very typical. It's actually very similar 4 years ago, 8 years ago. It was just always a new enemy and the actual political opposition linked to that. So that's a very simple model, but highly efficient. So what can happen? Anything can happen. So because of this very complicated situation, which is a lot of influences and irregularities of the legal spectrum, basically, at least a couple of days ago, maybe we are in a game-changing situation, but like a few days ago, we could say that Tisza may have more chance to win, but not necessarily sure. So Fidesz can also win. There are variations like Tisza can win supermajority or simple majority, or Fidesz can be supermajority.
But what would either case mean for people in Hungary, for voters? How would their lives change or not change depending on who wins?
Well, Hungary is in an economic crisis, so it's going to be very complicated to govern for anyone who wins. But obviously, if the opposition takes over, that will face an incredible amount of problems because of there will be autocratic holdover. Basically, this as the state is equal to Fidesz party, there's a lot of people in positions who can undermine an upcoming government. There are a whole series of legal ways how at least even the convening of a new parliament can be prolonged or delayed. I am not a lawyer, but there are plenty of ways how to make a new government or new parliament's life really difficult. Hungary is also in the situation of danger since COVID, basically for 5 years, which provides special rights for the for the government, even a caretaking government. So it will be very, very complicated. And if it's true that there are significant forces interested not to have this change, then of course that could make it even more complicated. And of course there are plenty of scenarios made all over in Hungary. I believe that, so in a more optimistic tone, if there is a change, how people behave, we cannot foresee in advance. So I think a lot of people can be just pragmatic and opportunistic. So I don't think that there will be a black and white situation. It can be very, very complicated, but I don't think it would be impossible to govern. But I think Hungary will need years and years to get out of this situation, because it is so different from the liberal democracy we know in Europe, and there are also a European environment which is not very favorable for positive change. I don't know who would be actually at help to us. I don't know what can we expect from the EU, or European elites, all the European elites who are also under all kind of pressures from radical parties. So that would be a super, super complicated situation.
Péter?
What could happen? I'm very serious to say anything. If you have seen Homeland, Netflix, anything which happens there could happen, and we could have a very common election also. I mean, it was just 10 years ago when in Montenegro there was an election, and that day the Russian army intelligence tried to kill one of the nominees. And I can imagine anything right now, after this case happened yesterday even. But I can imagine that also that Tisza wins. They send most of the leaders of the Fidesz to prison, and they make a new election very soon to get a huge majority to change the whole constitution. So it's a very wide range.
Would you agree with one of your Hungarian colleagues, a journalist, who told me that Magyar doesn't like criticism very much, and he doesn't like media that much either?
Who does?
Yes. Absolutely. But I don't think that it means he will make some kind of terror state or anything like that Orban made. I think usually politicians and journalists don't have to like each other. They have to live next to each other and give each other space to live. And they can argue. It's okay, and sometimes it's fun. But what happens if anything? The main scenarios. Every serious polls right now say that Tisza is leading, but quite a big margin. So if we won't have an election, it will be postponed. There will be some security issues. Because of the system Zsuzsa mentioned, Tisza get more votes, but even Fidesz will get more mandates in the parliament. Then it will be a terrible message for the Hungarian people that we are leaning to the old Eastern Bloc, and the dream of the new free world system in the early 90s disappears. On the other hand, if Fidesz could be beat, Fidesz could lost in a free election or some kind of free election, that is a promise we are still on the western side of the world, and there's a hope that we survive in that kind of hemisphere.
Well, Hungary survived Gulag communism as well, so there is always hope.
It's not Gulag communism any longer.
It's only goulash. Botton, I'm old enough to remember that in '89, when we saw one country after the other from Eastern Europe, when we saw the fall of regimes, I remember that Western media had these incredible articles. Now the freedom is coming, and they will bring all this new energy, and we shall learn from them. I'm remembering what La Repubblica wrote in Italy. Well, it didn't quite happen that way. I'm wondering, in Brussels, are they sort of hoping that Tisza would win, but are they very optimistic, or they're cautious? Or what, how, or if Orban remains, how do you think they will react? Let's do it shortly and then open to questions.
I guess your question has two very interesting aspects. One is, what is the general expectation? They don't believe the polls as much as Hungarians would, because they have seen similar cases before. So they don't want to buy the promise, that's for sure. And they are pricing in Orban staying, and therefore needing to continue cooperation with such a country and the government. And they don't want to put themselves in a worse situation by openly helping Tisza, which actually is anyway not solicited by Tisza at all. So they really refuse foreign money, support, no visits of dignitaries of the EPP. Definitely Manfred Weber will not turn up at the Tisza rally. So that's the base situation. And the other thing, what is difficult to explain, and maybe sometimes in the US counterparts, I really needed to explain that Tisza is in EPP, because they believe, after the MAGA spokesperson and the Hungarian connections with Heritage and the rest, that Tisza is a left-wing woke, whichever party could be, which is completely not the point. As well explained, Hungary went to the conservative spectrum without any left party actually currently polling above the threshold to get into the parliament. So people either don't know what Tisza is and they mistakenly identify it on a different spectrum, and they are also trying to guess the personality of Péter Magyar, which is not necessarily easy, and they are more cautious approaching him, whether he would be the same. And they give him the credit that, yes, during the campaign time, there are things that are not evident for campaigning or actually are reasonably not figuring in the campaign. But they are curious to find out what's next when he's on government. And that's more of a black box.
Thank you. Well, I first start, just raise your hand. Hedwig, Georg, here in the front row. Then here.
Thank you very much. I actually want to follow up on what you just said, because I think it would be great to learn a bit more about Magyar Péter, his background. He actually was a member of the club, and he left the club and he used the window of opportunity. He created a movement, and then out of that, Tisza emerged as a political party. And I think it would be interesting to find out more about his background, who he is actually, and what kind of an infrastructure they do have. And it is also for this question about what can Hungarians expect if they win the election.
Thank you. I'll take three questions, and then, can you? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just want
Please
to
introduce.
Yes, Grauenberg Institute of the Danube region, among other activities. I wonder about the words of Orban some years ago when he said that Hungary this time must be on the winning side. He compared it to the First World War, so this time it must be different. And he thought about Russia being stronger probably than the West. That was obviously the idea. On the other side, the 80 billion are blocked and other measures taken against Ukraine so that Ukraine may collapse, and he wouldn't mind. And is Hungary sort of the soft underbelly of Central Europe? Thank you.
Thank you. And the third question, yeah, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Caroline Ferstel, Daily Newspaper Courier. Though it's it's a too big issue, as you said. I would like to ask about the Russian interference, and maybe you can just pick one of the most used methods that you can expect or see in the election campaign, and what might happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who will start? I think it's...
You want to start with Hedwig's question? With Hedwig's question about the government composition?
Whoever starts, we will comment. So just go ahead.
Decide who will start.
Okay. So where is Magyar's from? He's from the elite. I mean, one of his grandfather was a TV star as a lawyer expert on a TV show in the 80s. One of his other relatives was the wife of the right-wing Fidesz-leaning president of the States in the 90s. And his wife was the Minister of Justice. So he's absolutely from an important and influential family, but he was not the part of the hardcore leadership of the Fidesz. He was member of the party, but he had no real important role inside the Fidesz. Once Orban said, if he was Magyar in the inner circle, then I was never in there. So he knows how politics works, and he has a good connections to almost every part of the Hungarian elite. On the First World War and Orban, yes, that's the sentence you mentioned is about how Orban will change the fate of Hungary. We was the losers in the last 500 years, but now we will be the winners. And to relate to this, important to understand that remarks you mentioned. And
Russian influence. Well, Russian influence.
Just continue and then.
Yeah, we can come to back there. Okay, so just on Magyar. So I'm dealing with political leadership for long, and I think that we don't know what kind of governor he would be. He definitely has political sense. We saw it since the beginning. What Peter said, he has a kind of, he always called himself like a conservative family, but not a radical. And that is his socialization. He's a very ambitious person, very strong drive. He always wanted to be politicians, but he could not be in Fidesz because he was too much for Fidesz. He was not disciplined enough. This is what we know from. So his wife was disciplined enough, to be there. So he does not have this huge stable party, as Peter explained, is a catch-up party. So he will have to work with all kind of people. And we will know what kind of politician in power will be if he wins. So I believe that politicians are made by the situations. Leaders are made by the moments. Most of the big leaders we know were typically smart people, even good people or bad, relatively smart, and he is smart. And there were the momentum when they become kind of transformative leaders. So we don't know yet, but we cannot doubt that he might have the chance. And so we have to offer the opportunity, and if we don't like, then we will fight against him. But until then, we offer the room. So for the Orban, and I think that he really deeply believed what he was saying for so long, that the West is on the decline and the East is on the rise. He was operational in building this kind of things, and his dramatic foreign policy change of paradigm towards this whatever multipolar world, he understood early on this kind of rise of the East. So this also helped him to be to full this kind of role which we described, which he positioned himself as a kind of world leader, politician. I actually believe this was not necessarily good for Hungary, it was good for Orban, and that's a different story. And I think he still believes that Europe is not on the right track and not strong enough. But of course, and this goes back to your original question, Mirjana, if he loses now, this would have serious consequences because it demonstrates the resilience of European society through Hungarians that no, you cannot go beyond the limit. And I think this is our responsibility now, we Hungarians, to show that there is a point where we do not accept a kind of autocrats. So the Russian interference, you definitely know more about that. What my worry is that what comes after the election, if Fidesz would lose, and that is really something we cannot really foresee.
For the case of the Russian influence, I think the most important part of it, maybe they have shadowy and secret acting. We will never know that, really. But one thing I think is very important, money flows towards Hungary through Russia. It happened always since the 90s. And it targets politicians to make them influenced by the Russian wish. And I think it is a very important part of Orban's story that he learned from his first government in the end of the 90s, that he needs to be not just a strong politician, but the richest person in the country also, to keep power, because he thought the political left had more economic influence than he had. And it was very easy to be rich from that kind of Russian influence and funds. I'm not able to prove this, but this is my strong theory.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words about the Russian influence?
Yes, definitely none of the former Soviet satellite countries managed to get rid of the Russian presence entirely since the regime change. So Iron Curtain falling, Russians transformed. In the 90s, it was trouble, it was more mafia, but we know the Russian families being present from the 90s in very important Hungarian financial corporations and still being there. And they have managed to co-opt the previous socialist government, and they have managed to co-opt Orban already in 2009, preparing the enlargement of the nuclear power plant. So that's something that we see more during election time about Russian influence, but Russian influence is always there. It's just that now we are a bit more sensitive. So we should talk once about it between elections, please. We talk a lot about disinformation, but I don't believe that disinformation is bringing you the people to vote. What disinformation does, according to the studies since 2016 that they did vis-a-vis the US interference and the rest, is creating political tribes. So what is successful is small incremental behavior change. You would have never guessed before COVID that anti-vaccination would become a political ideology. And we could add 5G and different things that probably in the room would be foreign to you, but they are not foreign to a larger and larger part of the populations. So those sub-pockets of extreme ideologies now unite under different radical right parties. And that's how Russia is disrupting our societies. And that is also ongoing in Hungary, but we should not forget, unlike in other Central European countries, Russian propaganda and agitation is not against Orban and the government, unlike in many of the other countries, in the Baltic countries especially. So that's a special case. And therefore, whether 3 agents are present, sent or not, that's not the important thing that in January we were talking about, but the fact that the Hungarian, the Budapest-based Russian embassy did not send away diplomats during the wartime, unlike many other countries in Europe, over 600-700 diplomats. Russian spies under diplomatic cover were sent home. Hungary was not taking part in this. And we could go on and on how all this happened. And former counterintelligence officials who left the services said that they were afraid that the counterintelligence capabilities were on purpose dismantled against Russian countering. So that's something pretty serious. That means that they can go freely in the country, which was again proven by one of the investigative pieces about penetrating the information system of the foreign ministry. That was, according to our knowledge, never patched. Again, it has been breached, but the government never told you that they patched it, right? So that's something that should not happen in a normal country.
Well, Budapest and Vienna share not only the former empire, but also the Russian presence here. I would like to ask my colleague who is helping, Sasha Rodanowski, to help us with, to read the questions in the chat. And please, Sasha, say also who formulated the question.
Yes, Jonas Heitze from News Magazine. Thank you for the interesting talk. My questions are, if Tisza wins the popular vote but Fidesz keeps the majority, how would people react? Do you think that the Pride law could be used to suppress demonstrations?
Okay, read all three questions.
Okay. Then Francesca De Benedetti, European senior editor at Domani. She asks, are there any evidence that CDU completely blocked its political ties with Orban's galaxy? And on the opposite side, would you claim that Tisza, figures such as Anita Orban, are completely against cooperating with Trump? And then finally, we have a question from Krzysztof Figlarz from the Poland's XYZ. I wanted to ask about Magyar's stance on Ukraine. What kind of politics towards Ukraine can we expect from Tisza? Will Magyar stop blocking funds from Ukraine from the EU, but also will he endorse Ukraine's willing on joining the EU?
Thank you. I guess Peter and Zsuzsa, the first two questions, and the third one is for you.
I'm joking that because if anyone answers for the third question, the fury of Mr. Magyar and the whole Fidesz-related state-supported media would quote us forever.
Right.
So, we have been in this bag.
So that background is important because it's a taboo to speak about it. But
That's also information, what you just said.
yes, about the Pride law and what would happen in that case. No, not the Pride law would not useful to use police against demonstrations on that kind of political level. And it's a very interesting question because I don't think the Tisza voters would be calm if that would happen. I can imagine strikes, I can imagine huge demonstrations also. And it's very interesting because Orban's and the Fidesz story, it's a very important part that they don't hurt people. The socialist government did this in 2006, and there was an outrage, and they lost very hard after that. And it's part of Orban's story that he never used widespread violence against demonstrators. If that would happen, that would be also a game changer in Hungarian politics, I think. About the CDU, I think for the CDU, they need to represent what the German industry needs. And they need to have some kind of relationship with any government. So even with Orban, I don't think there would be more problems between Berlin and Budapest than they already has. And Magyar's Ukraine policy, he always say his most important thing, what is good for Hungary.
Would you like to add something, Zsuzsa, or you?
So on CDU, I agree that, I mean, CDU is a big and pragmatic German party, back and forth on power, so they are dealing with every other big parties. The relationship with Fidesz at the moment is really bad. Orban is directly attacking Chancellor Merz. There are also anti-German and undertone in Fidesz's campaigning. It's really interesting. So I think the relationship at the moment is really bad between Fidesz and CDU. Despite this industrialist interest, there's very limited communication, and that was obviously is going to can change. With Trump, because there was also another question, I think Trump is the U.S. president at the moment. So whether a new different Hungarian government would deal with a U.S. president, they have to. So everyone speaks to Trump because he's the U.S. president. Whether this would definitely not mean a kind of relationship with the MAGA movement, which is a different story. So I think that is how a kind of rational, reasonable foreign policy of an upcoming Hungarian government would look like.
So with the CDU, just this Monday was probably the 5th time that Alice Weidel visited Budapest. And I guess you can hardly be a friend of anyone from CDU if you just legitimize the AfD leader. That's about it. And Orban started it very early, so it didn't started yesterday, but it started long ago. So that connection is broken, absolutely. Now they are in the same party with Tisza in EPP, so there is nothing preventing them from trying to negotiate. And just last Monday, at the last European Foreign Affairs Council meeting, so the ministers of foreign affairs met in town. Actually, the Germans were one of the most furious with the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs, at that point not for talking to Lavrov too much, because that came later, but for not allowing decisions to be taken. And the German government was talking about the qualified majority voting needing to be introduced because of the Hungarians. And I guess this is a point where Tisza is also very restrained whether that is a good idea. With Trump, the strange fact is that Tisza is more close to Trump than Fidesz. Why? Because of the China policy. So while Fidesz is absolutely pro-China, reaping in investments in 6, 7, 8 billions and leading in greenfield investments among EU member states, that's a compromise they might have made maybe informally with Trump at one point, that they can still keep it, but that's not going in line with the current Trump policy, while the Tisza party has a leverage on deciding how to deal with that and how much they align with EU interest, not that there is one aligned EU interest on China. So that's...
Magyar and Ukraine, do you dare say anything other than what is good for Hungary?
Well, I can say something. What we can say is what is in Tisza program and what Péter Magyar and other Tisza politicians are saying, that they aim to reconcile with European partners. So whatever this means, this is what we expect. This is, I believe, this is what their aim, this is what they will do, and because it is related to how the Hungarian government behaves in the European Council, that can have some, definitely some room for negotiations. How exactly it will look like, what kind of concessions one party or the other should make, it's obviously we have no idea, and probably they don't know either, because this will be up to the context. But I think that this kind of general aim of reconciling with European partners is their deep will, and this is also why Hungarians support Magyar. This is what one of the highest expectation from the voters, that Péter Magyar will stop this radical and conflict-generating attitude with people who we like and who we are among them. So I think that's we can definitely, this is what we can have in our mindset.
Thank you. And are there more questions?
One important aspect for Ukraine and the countries around Hungary, because Péter Magyar is talking a lot about the Hungarian community in the neighboring countries. And this is an extremely good political card that he is now playing, since Fidesz has been openly siding with historically anti-Hungarian parties, including the right wing in Romania, Georgescu and friends. Now with the new revelations that in 2020, after killing Jan Kuciak and the Fico government falling, Péter Szijjártó was trying to push in not only Pellegrini to meet the Russian prime minister, but also helping the extreme nationalist anti-Hungarian party in Slovakia to get back to the parliament. I mean, in no sane mind, any Hungarian politician would campaign for this. And we can question how the Serbian-Hungarian relation is ultimately helping or not Hungarian minorities, and why not in Vojvodina. So Fidesz really left this for big politics and instead focuses on Patriots for Europe, leaving the community interest of Hungarians in neighboring countries behind, and therefore Transcarpathia will fall into a different perspective. And I guess this is the smartest way to reframe communication, taking it out from classical Fidesz narratives.
Thank you. Are there any questions here, there? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Robert Kovács. I'm a history student here at CU, and I would like to have a follow-up on exactly this question, because despite the fact that Fidesz is openly supporting anti-Hungarian parties in Central Europe, what we can see is that still those transborder Hungarians that have a voting right still mostly support the Fidesz government. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas about what would happen if either Fidesz wins because of their votes, or can this somehow kind of like create a new discourse about nation in Hungary, that the Tisza voters would kind of like start to thematize a more civic understanding of nationhood as opposed to a more ethnic one, or do you think that this can create a rift in society? Thank you.
Thank you. We shall take one from online and then in the back.
This is Melanie Rydell from daily newspaper Der Standard. If Magyar wins, how likely is it, and how will it work, that the oligarch system the Orban established, like Mészáros, will be destroyed?
Thank you. Alexander Semeniuk, I'm with United Nations here in Vienna. And I have a question, I suppose, to Péter. You said in your answer to one of the questions earlier that a feature that defines the political climate in Hungary that cuts across the political spectrum is the sense of resentment that, with regard to how badly Hungary was treated in the 20th century following the Trianon Treaty, when large parts of the country went to other countries, including Ukraine. Do you think that this largely affects the current relationship between Hungary and Ukraine, given the fact that a part of Transcarpathian region is now Ukraine and used to be Hungary? And if that is the case, why do you think it is not the case with other countries, like, for instance, Romania, which also lost some of its territory to Ukraine when Stalin, with his homologue in Germany, were redrawing the maps, but they still managed to have decent relationship? Thank you.
Thank you. Before I give you, I just want to say, because our audience online comes from different parts of Europe and may not be aware that there is a Hungarian minority in neighboring countries like in Serbia and Romania. And I just want to add that I know people from Vojvodina who don't really have Hungarian blood. I'm not even sure they speak Hungarian, who got Hungarian citizenship. Because at one point, I'm not sure when it started and when it ended, it was very generous. Giving out Hungarian passports was very generous because I assume that the government in Budapest thought that they would all be Orban's voters. So, I mean, I personally know people, so it's not that I didn't read it in newspapers. They are from my family, extended family. So who would like to start?
Maybe I just pick up on that, because that was a huge issue between the United States and Hungary. Not because of Serbia, but because of Ukraine and then Russians from Ukraine getting Hungarian EU passports going to the US. And at one point, they decided to pause the Hungarian visa waiver program, which was unseen among other countries.
Do you have any idea how many Hungarian passports were given out to Hungarians outside of Hungary?
We should know the number, but I can't recall you now. The cases that they reside, it was not a huge number of cases in the US where either criminal activity or other national security issues were raised. That was in the hundreds. But the number of passports earlier in the 2010s that they issued, at one point it was by Spain flagged because Russian prostitutes arrived through the Hungarian visa agency in Moscow to the Spanish Riviera. So you can deal with passports in many different ways, and the Hungarian-Russian connection again worked very well on monetizing the Schengen area membership. Talking about the Hungarians in neighboring countries and the minorities, Fidesz was never really able to renew its narrative on this. They were stuck in the double citizenship approach, which was not anymore much actual, except for Serbia and Transcarpathia, but otherwise the large community in Transylvania did receive citizenship. And I believe by now we really need a much more tailored cut approach to the communities. When I go to Slovakia and talk to Hungarians, they are jokingly telling me that in the 90s they received 8 packages for Christmas, but now they will send it to Hungary. I mean, it's a euro-paying country, fully fledged, integrated into EU economy, and Hungarians are now going to South Slovakia for factory work. It was the other way around. So the stance of these communities have changed, but West Slovakia is again different from East Slovakia. So that will be a huge question how this will be reframed by Tisza, and I believe that there are extremely important negotiations to come in that. Also with potentially the governments of these countries.
So it's very important to see that the Orban government since the last 16 years spent a lot on the countries around Hungary and to help and influence the local Hungarian communities from all kind of institutions. So I mean sports, I mean cultural institution, schools, kindergarten, local authorities on every level. They influence mostly with money, but also with advice and influence people who has leadership in that kind of community leaders. So you are not able to find really strong institutions that would be independent from Fidesz in the neighboring countries. And I would say it's still a done deal. So I think most of the people who would vote from these countries, they will vote for Fidesz. I would say at least 90%, maybe more. Oligarch system. It's very interesting because I usually say there are no oligarchs in Hungary at all, because oligarch means someone who has the economic resource to influence the politicians. But in Hungary, mostly in the Orban system, it's absolutely the other side. The politics decides who could have economic influence. So I don't think the rich businessman would able to choke a new government. Maybe because of some state guarantees for their investments could be problematic. But as we have seen before when Fidesz came to power, they just kept working the same companies, changing the owner. And the people who made the job were the same. And I think something similar should happen. I think instead of oligarchs, there's a much more danger that the state institutions, that personal, informal web of the important bureaucrats can make more harm than the private economy. And the Hungarian minority related to the Hungarian-Ukrainian politics, it's a very interesting and important, delicate question. Everyone in Hungary speaks as the guardian of the Hungarian minority inside Ukraine. And you can reach from that perspective to an absolute Putinist narrative to an absolute narrative like you would hear in Warsaw. So you can make your own direction everywhere. So I don't think that is the most important part. I think the most important in Hungary that you have a pro-Russian or a pro-Ukraine narrative, but to tell this, you have to use the Hungarian minority as a way that is the most important for you, and because of that. And after the because of that, anything can come, as we hear at home.
Thank you. We have another question in the chat.
can I-
I'm sorry, of course.
Okay, just for the Ukrainian Hungarian. So I was a member of parliament in 2014, 2015, when the Ukraine made this language law, basically in order to push back the use of Russian language. But that also means that other minority languages were also somewhat related to this, and specifically in school systems. So it was really interesting how quickly the Hungarian government, unlike other governments, started to build a narrative against the Ukrainian government as a government that is repressing specifically Hungarians, though we know that the context was a different one. And ever since, it was step by step how the Hungarian government built up a counter-Ukrainian narrative. And I think it's really interesting looking back, because it was 2015, long before the war, when the Hungarian government used this so-called relatively small issue in a way to influence Ukraine's positions at various international organizations. For example, in NATO, there was a negotiation to create a NATO-Ukrainian joint committee, which was blocked for years and years and years, really referencing to this minority language law. So this was an entry point for the Hungarian government to basically introduce a pro-Russian argument, and it was ever created. But on the other hand, for Hungarians who were not specifically aware who the Ukrainians were, right? In the 1990s, no one really knew Ukraine so well as other countries and other people. So it was really easy to create a kind of negative view of Ukrainians. So when we speak today, how on earth this anti-Ukrainian sentiment is possible in Europe, which seems to be so nonsensical, is because it was prepared 10 years before in Hungary. So this is what just I wanted to say. This is a made-up story. It was very conscious. It was very political. And this was the way how Orban's government was not actually openly pro-Russian, but still could manage some kind of Russian narratives at international level. And on the oligarch question, there's a lot of plans about how to do this issue, because this is, again, another big promise of Tisza party, that they will take back money from those who stole public money. It's enormous amount, so we can think about like significant 5 to 10% of GDP of Hungary. So it's an incredible amount, which is now used by private entities, which should be in the hand serving the Hungarian state and Hungarian people. So it's a very important issue. And there are a lot of organizations, from Transparency International to lawyers, systematically thinking about what is legally possible to take back. So it will be taken care if there is a change.
Thank you. Please read the question.
It's a question from myself.
Wow.
My name is Sasha Ransky. I'm a journalist from North Macedonia. Hungary has several high-profile cases of giving asylum, political asylum, to people from other countries, including our ex-prime minister, who is there for almost 10 years and who otherwise would be in jail in North Macedonia if he comes back. Maybe for Botond as a lawyer, do you expect any change of this policy if Tisza wins? Can they actually cut because there are several other cases, it's not only our ex-prime minister.
Thank you, Sasha. Any other questions? We're almost out of time. Please go ahead and please, here. Okay, we'll start there and then here, it's easier.
Thank you. Liam Hoare, Europe correspondent for Haaretz. You mentioned Trump, you mentioned Putin. Obviously, Bibi Netanyahu also endorsed Orban this week. My superficial analysis is that there's not much difference between the Israel policy of Péter Magyar and Viktor Orbán, but do you anticipate any change in Hungarian foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel if Péter Magyar is prime minister?
Thank you. And so we have asylum policy, Israel, and here.
Ja, Europäische Union wieder. Hallo, Herr Goklan von Agence France Presse. Was Ungarn so spezifisch.
Do you mind asking in English?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I was in my German mind. I switched to English. Sorry. What was Hungary so specific? It's part of the European Union. So, do you think Orban would have had so much success without the democratic European Union? Thank you.
Can I start with the last question?
Yes.
I think it already happens. So just think about the decision on the last case of Repower EU, when the European Council decided to stop Russian gas coming into the EU. It's a sanction. To decide sanction, you need unanimous vote. But they decided this as not as a sanction. They labeled it different way, as it would be
Trade measure.
Yes. So and there are other examples like this. So when there's a team which don't keep the rules, because you can say several things that the Hungarian government even not taking what is the decision of the Court of the European Union. But you shouldn't exist as someone who not obeys to the court. But on the other hand, how to circumstance that kind of behavior? The EU also leaning to circumvent its own rules. And that makes the war project worse. I usually say it like it's if you take a bad apple into the basket, the other apples get infected. And I think it has already happened.
On Israel and asylum politics, who would like to?
So maybe on Israel, one remark that a potential incoming Tisza government would be lucky enough to have an election in Israel in the fall, the latest, right? So that's something that they can have the strategic patience to see how to deal with Israel. Given that Hungary has been truly enacting a more or less successful on-the-ground policy against anti-Semitism, I mean, the number of incidents are definitely much smaller than in many other countries. That's something that they already claimed several times to continue. Last time, maybe the Holocaust Remembrance Day. So therefore, my assumption is that that's not where they need to begin the shifts in foreign policy. And Bibi will be anyway busy with the war and the consequences and the fallouts. So that's a leverage for Tisza until the fall. Your question was if Orban would be successful without the EU, right?
Yeah.
I mean, given he always needed an enemy to beat, and he was always provided one. Whether it was in the very beginning, I remember in 2010, Daniel Cohn-Bendit was very active still, and for a couple of years to come to fight with him in Strasbourg. And Orban was enjoying going to Strasbourg because he could drum up the resistance to the illiberal tendencies. So therefore, we always found some actors in Brussels who were also using Orban as the bad pupil from the East. And I guess this was very much reinforcing Orban's minority complex that has been with him. If you read his, not his, but the biographies on him, what you understand is that him coming from a small town, being integrated at the Faculty of Law in Budapest in the 80s, was still the battle between urbanite elite and people coming from the countryside. And the story of his college people was this really huge gap between the two social segments and how he was resenting against the elite. And in some ways, that was repeated in the EU again. So when in 2010, as Prime Minister, the first time, because he left in 2002 before entering to the EU, he again enters the club of the West. He is telling this in several interviews of the time, how he felt sort of disdain from politicians being, Ursula von der Leyen's father was Prime Minister. In Belgium, you find political dynasties. In France, and except for Sarkozy, the rest of the people coming from the same branch. So that has a strong feeling of being minority, and some of the politicians in the West did like to play on it. And that was helping him, so he then smartly used this on his own way for domestic political communication.
Thank you. We have like 1 minute, or just on asylum. Do you think that asylum policy may change?
I would like to comment on the other issues as well.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Okay, I don't comment on the European things, but so we don't know. I mean, none of us are future, Tisza politicians, so what I can imagine, and this is also a kind of related comment to the Israel issue. So what I expect from the next potential Tisza government and its foreign policy is that it wants to overcome of the Orbanist foreign policy, which is not a foreign policy. It's an influence in the world in combined way of business, private interest, international relations, and everything. This is exactly how Orban changed Hungary's foreign policy. It's not a foreign policy any longer. It's influence making. Everything is political, and political from the perspective of Viktor Orbán's interest, his business interest, and then he sells it as the country's interest. So maybe they would revise these policies, right? And maybe not in the first day, but at some point probably yes, because it's also pretty awkward that we are providing asylum for people who are, neighboring countries' politicians wanted. And it's also related to the Israel thing, because that's also not a foreign policy issue for Viktor Orbán, but a mix of combined, very blurry interests, which we cannot really know about. And I think a potential Tisza government would put it on a more kind of reasonable foreign policy base, something like with, as we said, with Trump. So, and of course, the future of Israel also is in many ways, Israel politics is in question. So these kind of systematic changes we can expect at a certain point, and I think this is obviously we are hoping for.
Well, we are hoping that the elections will be both free and fair. And I want to...
Not fair, we know.
I know, that's why I said we're hoping. I want to thank you. This has been 2 hours without a break, talking about Hungarian politics and understanding, and I would like to underline how important it is to understand the local context, because only people who really live in the country can understand the context. And when we analyze things from abroad, we can give different issues, different priorities. Please, a big applause for our wonderful speakers, and we shall know what happens on the 13th. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to Vienna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.